You're listening to a podcast by the Perennial Leader Project. Welcome back to In Search of Wisdom. I hope this finds everyone wise and well. After a brief summer break, we're going to spend the next few weeks and talk about a few timeless perspectives. Today's topic is impermanence. The notion of impermanence or nothing lasts is stressed across wisdom traditions. It's generally viewed as a foundational perspective or universal truth. Although it seems like most things, we can have a tendency to overestimate our understanding, or we might easily forget this idea. As we've discussed previously, a philosophy of life has three components. One is metaphysics, or you could think about it in the way of how the world works. Another part of a philosophy of life is ethics or virtues. And finally, you have a set of exercises or practices. In my experience, most of us spend more time and effort on ethics and practices than on shaping our perceptions or views and beliefs about the world. However, it's essential to recognize that our perspectives play a role in shaping our ethics and practices. So that's what we're going to talk about today. In the way of the world, one thing that's come up is it's constantly changing. We all generally experience this firsthand and know this to be true. Figures like the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus and the Buddha stress that understanding that nothing endures but change is central to living a good life. Heraclitus called change the only constant thing, emphasizing that everything flows and nothing abides. Everything gives way and nothing stays fixed. Take a moment and consider reflecting on that. How does that influence or shape your daily life? Is this idea something that you're consistently aware of? Marcus Aurelius contemplates the notion of change throughout meditations. In one well-known passage, he writes, "Is change something to fear? But can anything happen without change? Is there anything that's nearer and dearer to universal nature? What about you personally? Can you take a warm bath unless the firewood undergoes a change? Can you be nourished unless your food undergoes a change? Can anything else worthwhile take place without change? So don't you see that the changes you experience are no different and are similarly necessary to universal nature?" How many of us take the time to really reflect, like Marcus Aurelius did, on a topic as important as change? Understanding what it is, understanding the need for change, the wisdom of change. Do we even see ourselves as constantly changing? It's worth asking, are we making decisions as the person you are today or a past version of yourself? What if the past has little to do with the direction we choose today? How might our lives change if we adopt the Buddha's view that one moment can change a day and one day can change a life? The truth is, we're constantly becoming. It's not only Heraclitus, the Buddha, and the ancient Greeks stressing this point. The existentialists also urge us to realize that we're constantly becoming. Some of you might remember my conversation with Sky Cleary, the author of How to Be Authentic, discussing Simone de Beauvoir's philosophy and the notion of becoming. Cleary explains, for Beauvoir, there's no fixed essence to our being, since we're always becoming something other than what we are today. Existence precedes essence, meaning that we exist first and then spend the rest of our lives creating who we are, our essence. To the question, how do we embrace the idea of becoming in our daily lives? Cleary responded, it's a difficult question. Beauvoir talks about there's part of her idea here is romantic, I guess with a capital R, in the sense that we're constantly annihilating our past selves and creating ourselves anew. But it's not like we're completely getting rid of our past selves. What we need to understand about our lives is that we are a synthesis of our past, present, and future. And our past doesn't shape who we're becoming. It shapes how we project ourselves into the future. But it doesn't define us in an absolute way. Similarly, the existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre talked about being and nothingness, because we're actually both. We are the facts of our existence, but we're also nothingness in the sense that we're never complete. There's always that gap or that lack of what we're becoming in our future. Whether or not you resonate with the Stoic perspective or an existential view, it's important to recognize that the maxim, this too shall pass, is universal. It's how the world works. The notion that nothing lasts is one of the most well-known and observable of the eternal truths. The pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus, who I discussed earlier, stressed that the river where you set your foot just now is gone. Those waters giving way to this. Now this. Put another way, he says, no one ever steps in the same river twice because they're changing and the river is changing. The maxim, this too shall pass, is truly universal. It applies to the moments in life that we cherish and those we despise. But despite how obvious this eternal truth is, we often fail to recognize its wisdom. Buddhist scripture tells the story of a religious teacher named Araka who used analogies and metaphors to illustrate the shortness of life. Just as a dewdrop on the tip of a blade of grass will quickly vanish at sunrise and will not last long, even so is human life like a dewdrop. Just as when rain falls from the sky in thick drops, a bubble appearing on the water will quickly vanish. It will not last long. Even so is human life like a water bubble. And the third is, just as a line drawn on the water with a stick will quickly vanish and will not last long, even so is human life like a line drawn on water. It's worth reflecting that the idea of impermanence is part of the path to the good life. It's an aspect of leading a life. Elsewhere in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "In man's life, his time is a mere instant, his existence a flux, his perception fogged, his whole bodily composition rotting, his mind a carousel, his fortune unpredictable, his fame unclear. To put it shortly, all things of the body stream away like a river." This too shall pass, or the wisdom of impermanence, applies to all seasons of life. It reminds us that storms pass and that the time to start living is always now. The modern meditation teacher Joseph Goldstein writes frequently and talks frequently on the topic of impermanence. In his book, Mindfulness, he wrote, "When we see deeply that all that is subject to arising is also subject to cessation, that whatever arises will also pass away, the mind becomes disenchanted. Becoming disenchanted, one becomes dispassionate. And through dispassion, the mind is liberated." It's important to realize that impermanence is embedded into life. It's simply how the world works. And that is a beautiful thing. Each day and moment is an opportunity to begin again. The wisdom of impermanence is about understanding that nothing lasts. We and everything else are perpetually dying and becoming every day. Our choices, our decisions, they matter. The wisdom of impermanence also shows up in spiritual traditions. The classic work Meditations on Death by Thomas A. Kempis talks about the shortness of life, similar to philosophical traditions. Kempis writes, "Your time here is short, very short. Take another look at the way in which you spend it. Every action of yours, every thought should be those of someone who expects to die before the day is out. If you aren't fit to face death today, it's very unlikely you will be tomorrow. Besides, tomorrow is an uncertain quantity. You have no guarantee that there will be any tomorrow." The wisdom of impermanence is understanding that on a deep level, if you will, in our core, that the future lies in uncertainty. This too shall pass is truly a timeless maxim to live by. Thank you for listening to another episode of the In Search of Wisdom podcast. You can expect our normal interview-style episodes on Wednesdays of each week. I hope you found something useful for daily life in this new series, and if so, as always, I urge you to put what you heard into practice. Until next time, be wise and be well.